Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's time for my August wrap up, so let's go and take a look back at the books I read last month. So in many ways I feel like August wasn't a great month in terms of both the quality and quantity of the books that I read, but that really does depend on what I'm comparing them against, because I did read 5 books. I also got halfway through one which is about 600 and something pages, and I DNF'd another one after about 140 pages. So that's another book if you combine the both of those. So I can look at that and say that I read 6 books, and that's a pretty good figure, especially looking at where some of my reading months have ended up. And then for the quality, they averaged out at just below 4 stars, which again is pretty good going, so I really don't know what I'm complaining about. I will start with the normal then, so we'll go through the stats first of all, and then I'll have a look at the actual books themselves, and I'll do timestamps in the description box below, so you can skip ahead if you're not bothered by the stats and just look at the books themselves. So for the stats, I'll only include the 5 books that I've finished. So I'd say I got through about 140 pages of one book, which I will cover in the wrap up but not in the stats, and the book that I'm halfway through that carries over to September will be included in my September wrap up, because that'll be the month that I finished it. So as far as the page count goes, I completed 2,270 pages across those 5 books, which is an average of 454 pages per book, and the average rating came out at 3.9 because I had a 4.5 star, 2 4-star and 2 3.5-star reads. For the year to date, the total completed pages is 22,333, which is an average of 514 pages per book. So August was a little bit lower in that respect, and the average rating for the year has also come down a bit, and that's now standing at 3.99. For the series stats, I've now started 16 different series in 2022. I've finished 4 and I haven't DNF'd any series that I was previously counting as ongoing. Series that I'm up to date with is 11, and the total ongoing series, combining all of those together, is now at 25. And then as there were no 5-star reads this month, the days since the last 5-star is now extending to 38, going back to Bonds of Chaos, which was supposed to be one of my August reads, but where the review copies were released a little bit early, I was able to polish that one off last month. So on to the books, and here I will talk about the DNF book. There is also a dedicated review video for this one because it was one of my SPFBO reads. I read A Phantom's Vengeance by Marco Mizzi, and it is very rare, I did say so in the video review, that it is very rare for me to DNF a book. It's not something that I generally do. I'm a bit too stubborn and I will normally push on through them. This one though, I just really couldn't motivate myself to finish. There were some bits in it that I wasn't overly keen on, some bits of the writing that just didn't gel with me. I felt it a little bit confusing reading it, and I was flicking back at a few too many places to try and double check something that had come a few pages before, or reading sentences back several times just to try and make sense of them in my head. So that's never a good sign when I'm reading a book, even if it's a book and an author that I'm enjoying. With this one though, there was then some scenes in it that I really didn't like, and one of them was the straw that broke the metaphorical camel's back and made me put the book down. And with that one, because I was reading it from my judging pot for SPFBO 8, I already knew that there was at least one book that was going to finish a lot higher than this one, so it helped me make the decision to put this one down and add it to my DNF pot. I don't rate books that I don't finish because I feel that it's unfair to do so. I'll review it and I will say that I DNF'd the book. I didn't get to the end of it, and so therefore my review is based on the portion of the book that I did read, but I don't give it a star rating anywhere, which means you won't find one for it here either. After that one, I moved on to another review copy. This one was for The Warrior by Stephen Aryan. This is book 2 in the Quest for Heroes duology, following up The Coward, which I read a couple of months ago, and I had a really good time with it actually. This one, equally, I had a good time with. It wasn't as good as The Coward. I really enjoyed The Coward and thought that it was not necessarily unique, but it's one that you don't see the kind of themes that you have in there very often, and I really feel that that elevated The Coward a little bit higher than it might otherwise have finished out. Without those themes, because you can't really do that again in the second book. I'm not going into spoilers to say what those themes are, but I mean, it's kind of in the title of that first book, I guess. But with a warrior, you don't have that same kind of undercurrent throughout this book when looking at the main character, and without that kind of novelty value, I think it does kind of detract a little bit from the book itself. Overall, the idea behind the warrior was quite good. I liked that we went on a bit of a quest and we saw a different part of the world, and it was a very interesting world with some different concepts behind it. And also the way that the kind of almost two worlds, if you like, have an impact on each other because they are very different. And again, being very vague here to avoid spoilers, but certain elements of this new land that they visit really will have an impact on the rest of the characters who don't go, and also the characters who do go when they return. So I thought that was a really interesting take, and that's probably the one thing that really, again, kind of elevates it. A bit like the Coward had that kind of unique undercurrent, it did give the Warrior a bit of a unique flavour as well. Overall, I really like the characters in the Quest for Heroes series. I think they were a little bit better, the kind of side characters that we had in the Coward. I did prefer to the side characters that we had in the Warrior, because we do have a bit of a different crew around Kel as the main character. But I think that the new characters that we did get were still quite interesting, and there were some characters from the Coward who still appeared, and that helped to integrate the new characters that we got. Overall, it was definitely an enjoyable ride. It was a really good series to have finished. I like that it's a duology. I can't remember the last time that I read a duology, but both of these come highly recommended. And so as a rating, I gave this one 4 stars. Then I had my final SPFBO read from my kind of official capacity in the competition, where I'm judging books as part of Team Bookborn, and this one was I Shall Return with Winter by C.F. Welburn. This one's a Norse-inspired story, and it's a tale of revenge, and with this one, I do quite like the elements that we got in there. We've got a bit of prophecy in there as well, but instead of kind of a normal prophecy, it does a little bit turn it on its head, because we're talking about someone who's coming from outside. He's one of the enemy essentially, and he's basically kept alive because he is touched by a god, and that makes him essentially a party to this prophecy. So it's quite an interesting concept, because it's not something that he believes in, it's not his god that has touched him, and it means that he ends up going into a world that he doesn't know, with people that he doesn't understand, and it's quite interesting. One of the kind of favourite elements of the book for me was the way that he has to learn to live with these people, and it's really nice to get to see them through the eyes of an outsider. So I really appreciated the way that was done, and the way that we could see the character grow as he learns about these other people and learns that his enemies aren't necessarily, well, they're still his enemies, but they're not the people that he thought they were. This was a really enjoyable read overall. It did have a few parts of it that were a little bit too slow. There was a bit of travel, and I'd said in my dedicated review that one of the things that I didn't like about it in that respect were that you would have these long periods of travel where they go out kind of on a side quest, I guess, and the way that's narrated is in a style that just doesn't work for me. It kind of read out as a diary. On the first day we did this, on the second day we did that, on the third day we did that, and I just find it really difficult to keep interested in narrative like that. Overall though, the book was pretty good, the action was pretty neat in it, I did like the ideas behind it. The ending wasn't an ending that I was expecting, but it definitely fit in with the story overall. This one was one of the better books that I had in my pot for SPFBO, and it ended up at 3.5 stars. I then moved on to another review copy, and it was another Angry Robot title that I got this time from NetGalley. This was Silver Queendom by Dan Cobbold, a story about a group of con artists essentially who go out on a job, or they go out on various jobs. There's one that is listed as the kind of the headline heist, the story that the book is all about, but it's actually about so much more when you're reading it rather than reading just the synopsis. So instead of just this one heist, we have several jobs. We start off with a job that goes wrong, and that gets this crew in debt to the dame, who kind of oversees all of the different groups of con artists and crooks in the area. So they owe her money from this take because they didn't get what they wanted from it for various reasons, and they end up taking on all these various little jobs trying to earn the money to pay her back, and then they take on one big job that will pay off all their debts and let them live kind of happily ever after. This one is to steal a shipment of Imperial Dream Wine, and they say it in the synopsis and they say it a couple of times in the book. No one has ever boosted a shipment of Imperial Dream Wine. And it seems kind of more because of what it is rather than where it is. It's not a case of taking on a heist in the most impenetrable fortress or anything along those lines. It's kind of more the concept of it, I think. No one would dare to do it rather than no one can do it. So that was an interesting take in that respect, but I did like the individual jobs, the individual heists, and more than anything, I liked that there were individual heists rather than having the whole book kind of building up to this one final job. So overall, I liked it. The characters were good. The world was quite interesting. It seems to be a standalone. It definitely reads as a standalone, but one that you can absolutely see more books in the future. It definitely does leave it open for that in the end, and I would absolutely like to see more books because I had a really good time with this. It was a really good, light-hearted, quick reading, enjoyable read, and it's one that I gave 4.5 stars to. The next book that I read was an audio book. This was gifted to me by the author, actually, Christopher G. Brenning, who wrote The Hellborn King. So this one I mentioned in my series, kind of catch up, checking in where I was with the books that I wanted to read and the series that I wanted to be moving through. And The Hellborn King was one of the books that was on my list for this year that I hadn't yet got to. Chris saw that, contacted me and very kindly sent me a copy of the audiobook, or a code for the audiobook, and there were a few other people in my Discord actually who were reading it in August as well, so we made it an informal buddy read for my Discord server. There were a number of the people who really had a good time with it. I think I was maybe a little bit behind the curve in that respect. I enjoyed this book, but definitely not as much as some of the others. And I think for me, part of that was actually because of the audio. I started out really actually liking the audio. I thought it was a really good narration. But as the book went on, and it's something like 600, 700 pages, so there's quite a bit of book to go through. But as it went on, I started to almost resent some of the voices that we use for the characters. And this is especially the female characters. I just don't think the voices that the narrator gave those really did anything for me. In fact, they actually kind of worked against me. I started to really not like them. I know my friend Nina said that she was similar with one particular point of view character, and when she got to that character's point of view chapter in the book, she would turn off the audio and read it on her Kindle and then go back to the audio when the chapter was finished. I didn't do that, but in many ways I kind of wish that I did, because I just was really put off by some of these voices. And that seems really weird because, as I say, I started off quite enjoying them, but I think it was as you got further through the book, you started to get more and more of the female POV chapters, and so that kind of worked against me in that respect. Anyway, as far as the story goes, it was pretty enjoyable. There's definitely some questions that we don't have answered, but I mean, it's book one in a series, so you're bound to get that at some point, and you wouldn't want book one of a series to answer all the questions and not leave anything open for book two, so that is absolutely fine. But it does leave us kind of wondering a little bit on some of the motivations of the characters, but not in a way that really impacts the enjoyment of the book. I quite liked, again, some of the battle scenes in this one. They were quite vividly detailed and enjoyable for me. I do like a nice big battle scene in a book, and I think there was a good job done throughout on these ones. Some of the characters didn't quite work for me. One who was a key character and one of the POV characters was this great commander who never lost a battle, but when she came to a battle, she didn't really seem to know what she was doing. And there's an element of being kind of put into the position because of her relationship with her superior officers. So she hasn't got to her kind of rank on merit necessarily, but still she has been through these battles in the past, so she should be used to it. She should know how to deal with it and have the, not necessarily the respect. It wasn't that respect of her soldiers was missing. It was just that she didn't really seem to have the experience and know what to do in a battle, and she was taking instruction from other people, which you would do. You would take input from those, but it seems like they were definitely more suited as the commanders rather than serving under her command. So it was just a little bit odd in that respect. I didn't get the explanation. It didn't work for me that she was put there not on merit but because of her relationship with her senior officers. Yes, you would get that, and I appreciate it, and you would have someone who didn't know what they were doing, but we do get little bits that are thrown in here and there that suggest that she should be battle hardened. She's never lost a battle, and it's not a case that she's had one minor skirmish and she didn't lose, so therefore she's never lost a battle. It gave me the impression that she's fought several battles, at least several campaigns, and she has never lost. So that really kind of irked me, and there were a few other little bits with some of the other characters as well that just didn't quite work for me. But I really do think that it was the voices overall that kind of led me to be a bit more picky with several of those characters. So I think if I continue with the series, which I'm not looking to straight away, but at some point in the future, if I continue with book 2 when that's released, which is just around the corner now, I believe, I think I will do that one physically rather than taking the audio on that, and see if I have a better experience for it. Either way, this one, I did enjoy it, just maybe not as much as I hoped, and certainly not as much as I wanted to, and I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. And then the last book that I completed was another book that was supposed to be a buddy read, but I don't think too many people were actually reading this one in my Discord, and this was The Wolf of Oronjaro by K.S. Veloso. So I know one of my patrons was reading this at the same time. Tufty McTavish had a really good time with it and went out and bought the next 2 in the series. He definitely enjoyed this one, again just a little bit more than me, although I did have a good time with it. I felt this one was more kind of an opening book in the series. It was very noticeably so. I felt that this was more setting the scene though than telling its own story. I didn't feel like I got too much from the story beyond an introduction to the characters and kind of a little bit of a history and things like that. So I am looking forward to where book 2 and book 3 will go with this one now that we've got that kind of scene setting out of the way. This was another one that I did the audiobook for, and I actually quite liked the narration of this one, and I think it helped in a couple of places where the pacing was maybe a little bit slower. There were a few flashbacks, and I don't normally like flashbacks, but I feel that they worked quite well here, and they definitely they were well placed in terms of the story and what we were flashing back for. But the overall story, I would say on the one hand it wasn't what I was expecting, but on the other hand, I really don't know what I was expecting, because it was so long ago that I read the opening chapter as part of my opening chapters that I read of 5 books to see which one I was going to read next. But also just the synopsis, I really had no idea beyond kind of the opening line, if you like, of I killed a man the day before my wedding or something along those lines, and then her husband disappeared and she's received a letter to go to meet him. And that's kind of where the book goes. She goes to meet him and she basically takes a really long time to get back because of the things that happen in this foreign land where she's gone to meet him. So I guess in terms of my expectations, it's not what I would expect from a book of this type, but I think it did work quite well. It showed us definitely the character, a little bit of a world as well, and a bit of a history for the character at least. And as I say, I'm quite looking forward to the next book in the series to see what happens next. I think what I will need to do is take a look at the synopses of book 2 and maybe book 3, but I don't want to spoil myself for book 2, but just to see what kind of story to expect going into book 2, but it is one that I've added to my ongoing series list because I will be looking at continuing with this one at some point. Rambling aside, this one was overall an enjoyable book. I did have a good time with it, and I think the audio, as I say, really did help because it was a really nice narration. The character voices were all fine. The intonation of the narration itself worked quite well. This one was one that I gave 4 stars to. It was maybe a bit on the generous side because I wanted a bit more from the story, but I did enjoy it enough to give this one a flat 4 stars. So that's my overview of August anyway. I feel like I rambled my way through this one way more than I should have done, so I apologise for that. I hope you got a bit of an idea of what I thought of the books anyway. What did you think of the books that you read for August? What was your favourite read that you had last month? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll be interested to find out. Also down there, as always, you'll find all of my social media and support the channel links, including my book club Discord. Do come along and join in the conversation and the buddy reads that we have as a community, and also my Patreon if you're interested in helping to support the channel that a little bit more and joining in and getting some of the extra little goodies available there. That's it for today though anyway. I hope to see you in the next video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.